This episode is sponsored by Prodigy. Teachers, back at school and busier than ever? Prodigy makes math prep so much easier with free, ready-to-go math assignments and real-time student data, so you can save time all year. Learn more at prodigy.com. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics welcomes you to Adding It All Up, a podcast created by and for mathematics educators and teachers. Join us each month as we explore current topics, insights, and emerging trends with thought leaders in the math community. And now, the hosts of Adding It All Up, NCTM President LaTrenda Knighton and NCTM Past President Kevin Dykma.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Adding It All Up. As we've been preparing for this episode, we found ourselves coming back to a theme that feels especially timely, not just for this time of the school year, but for teaching in general. One thing that we've noticed that's been coming up in conversations lately, whether it's been planning meetings, at school, or just chatting with other educators, is the idea of why we teach. Not always necessarily in this big philosophical sense, but in those everyday decisions that shape how we show up for our students. There's something important about stepping back and asking, what do I want students to carry with them when they leave my classroom at the end of the semester, at the end of the school year? Not just content-wise, but as people.
Kevin, that is so true. And I think that question impact, that lasting effect, what we're really passing on to students is such a powerful message. I've been reflecting on that too, especially thinking back on the teachers who made the biggest difference in my life as a student, and also thinking of those teachers who made a big difference in my life as an educator as well. It was never really just about the math that we were learning. It was the way those teachers saw me, the way they challenged me when I didn't want to be challenged sometimes, or how they created a space where I felt curious, but I also felt safe at the same time. And those are the things that stick with you. And so that's the legacy of what we call this whole experience of education.
Exactly. I absolutely love that word legacy because it pushes us to zoom out a little bit. So a lot, I think, as educators, we get in the thick of pacing guides, of test prep, of end of quarter grades, as beginning of school year stuff. But there's a whole other layer to our work that's really about making those connections, that purpose, that long view. As somebody who was in the classroom for almost 30 years, I love when I go places and run into former students. I still remember last summer, we had to get a couple of our sprinkler heads fixed, and the person that showed up was one of my former students. And LaTrenda, a little bit ago, you talked about those students that challenge you. This is one of those students that definitely challenged me. But it was so great to see him being successful in the career that he had chosen. But it was more powerful for him to say, thank you, Mr. Dykma, for not giving up on me. I know I was an absolute jerk to you at times, but thank you for keeping on pushing me and having all of that patience. And it's those moments. And I know we both have stories of that. Most of our listeners have numerous stories of those students they run into years later that thank them. And you see them out in society. And that's really helpful for me. I think, all right, that's why I did that day-to-day stuff. And that's the reason that we're in this education business, to have a legacy for future generations.
Kevin, that is a great example. Like you, I see some of those students who challenged me sometimes. And then I see some of those who maybe I had to challenge and maybe give a lot more encouragement, a lot of things to push them just to really see themselves just as mathematicians or people who can learn and do math. When I think about my experiences, most of my classroom experience was with younger students than the students you taught. So a lot of times I run into the parents of those students and they'll tell me, LaTrenda, I have to tell you, back then when Kevin was in your classroom, because I had a lot of Kevins, I can tell you some stories about some of those Kevins, Kevin. They were interesting. And it's like, LaTrenda, I remember when Kevin was in your classroom and I kept thinking, why is she doing these things? Why is this important? And I saw later that every time when we would bring up something in real life or we'd go to the store, he would talk about, oh, well, in Miss Layton's class, I learned this, or I learned that. And so I think I'm going to use this strategy to do that. And it's like, it used to bother me all the time when I kept hearing this strategy, that strategy. But now that he's older, I see that he is actually going back to those connections. So I see why you guys do the things you do as teachers to help students make sense of what they're learning. So it's rewarding to talk to the students, but it's also rewarding to have the parents see why we engage in the work we engage in as well.
Oh, I absolutely love that reminder. And I think it's so important that we keep folders, whether they're digital, in person, or physical folders, of those messages that we get from students and from their parents, those little notes that we get, the emails that we get, because we all know that we have those days of like, why in the world are we doing this? To be able to have that legacy of those notes to be able to look back at. Well, I'm very excited for the rest of our episode today. And our guest today is going to talk about math teaching as legacy work. And she does it so beautifully. How teaching is both an invitation and a challenge. An invitation to lead with attention, and a challenge to think honestly about what we're building over time. But she doesn't just leave it at the big ideas. She's going to give us some thoughtful examples of what this really looks like in a math classroom. It's going to be a conversation that's made us both stop and reflect. And we think it's going to be one that really resonates with you too.
With our new school year getting underway for some folks, this conversation is a chance to slow down a little and remember what matters most. So let's dive right in and let's get started. So, all of our listeners, we want you to please welcome Latifa Adine. Latifa is our opening session keynote speaker for the annual meeting in Atlanta this October. Latifa, would you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Latifa Adine. I'm an associate professor of math education at Kennesaw State University. I am so excited to talk with you all, not only today, but also in October in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm currently living.
Well, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And we know you're going to dive deeper into these in a few weeks in Atlanta with us. But we know that not all of our listeners are going to be there. And we hope that more of our listeners will join us there in person. But we're just so excited that you're willing to share a few of these ideas so that we can get our wheels spinning. And for those of us who are unable to come to Atlanta, that we can still hear a little bit of the brilliance from you. So your keynote is titled as both an invitation as a challenge. Without spoiling everything from that keynote, can you tell us what inspired this framing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my talk, I really want to honor the dual reality of teaching today. So to me, there's both a deep tension and hope. So the invitation is really to see mathematics as creative, as humanizing work, and really an opportunity to build something meaningful with students. However, there still is a challenge. And I think through that challenge, it's important to pause and ask, what are we really building? Whose brilliance are we really centering? And for me, the talk is really a call to reflect on how our practices either sustain or disrupt the status quo, and what we're really willing to reimagine for our students and also ourselves.
You describe teaching as legacy work. What does that mean to you personally and or professionally?
Absolutely. So Kevin talked about this earlier in his opening. And for me, legacy work is about what lasts beyond the lesson plan. It's the feeling students carry about mathematics and also themselves long after they leave our classrooms. Personally, I think about the teachers similar to you, Latrinda, the teachers who saw something in me before I saw it in myself. And also professionally, I've seen how our choices, how we respond to students' questions, how we center them in math discussions can really shape whether a child sees themselves as capable or not. So going back to the earlier comments of, in addition to teaching content, we are literally shaping identity and possibility for our students.
So Latifa, when we think about this legacy work, what do you hope that math teachers will reflect on when they think about their own legacies?
So I hope teachers will ask, what do our students walk away believing about mathematics, about learning, and about themselves? Because legacy isn't always what we intend to do. It's also about what students experience. Do we intend to invite joy in our spaces? Do we honor their thinking? Do we hopefully our students feel seen? And to me, that's the kind of legacy that we really want to live on with our students.
This episode is sponsored by Prodigy. Teaching math just got easier. With over 1,500 standards-aligned skills available in a free, game-based platform, Prodigy helps you cover what matters while keeping students totally engaged. Learn more at prodigy.com.
You talk a lot about teaching with purpose in your work and your research and things like that. So what does purposeful teaching look like in a math classroom?
I think teaching with purpose moves beyond rote memorization instruction and really engaging students in rich mathematical thinking that connects concepts, procedures, problem solving. Purposeful mathematics is intentional. In addition to developing fluency and conceptual understanding, it's also about affirming students' identities as mathematical thinkers. It makes mathematics relevant to their lives, to their communities, and it also invites them to reason and make connections and communicate their ideas while really engaging in worthwhile math tasks that sparks curiosity, perseverance, and critical thinking.
Oh, this is getting me so excited to hear you for a full hour in Atlanta in a few short weeks. I'm looking forward to learning more from you. I think most of us are nodding our heads and saying, yeah, we want to help bring this joy, this connection with our students. But then sort of the reality of teaching hits. And we feel this pressure of getting through the curriculum, getting them ready for the testing, all those standards. Any ideas of how we might bail on some of those pressures with getting connections, making that legacy with our students?
Absolutely. And I appreciate the question because this is real. The pressure is real. And I do believe that, however, even with the constraints, we can still have choices. And the choices could connect to the idea of joy should not be extra. Making connections should not be extra. They should be a part of how students are learning mathematics in a very deep way. So it really means shifting how we frame a task, maybe slowing down a little bit to really making sure we're highlighting student voices and their insight, or even reimagining what we do to start the math lesson in our routines. How much do our routines really embody student voice and agency? So I believe even with small acts of curiosity and care, that can really create a joyful space without abandoning the standards that a lot of teachers make sure they keep in the forefront.
You actually just touched upon this, so I'm going to actually ask you to elaborate a little bit. If you could think of one small step that a listener can take tomorrow, what would you suggest to teach with more intention, to teach with more connections, and to really have that focus on how they are creating that legacy moment? What might be one or more of those small steps you would suggest?
So I would start with the students, really asking students to share how they see the mathematics and not just what the answer is. And to really, really, really listen. Let their voices shape the flow of the lesson. And I do believe those moments of listening, affirming their thinking, can really shift not only their confidence, but also the classroom culture. So for me, intentional teaching starts with presence and making sure we are fully present and making sure our students are knowledgeable of what that looks and feels like in a classroom community together.
Oh, I have so appreciated this focus on the student, and absolutely so powerful, isn't it, Brenda? It's been so nice just to hear this focus on the student and what are we doing for the student, and remembering that, this is the reminder, we're not just teaching mathematics. We're teaching students. We're teaching real life human beings who bring all that extra stuff with them, whatever, the Kevins of the world that LaTrenda taught and runs into all the ones that I have had over the years. And it's such a good reminder to really focus in on that student, building those relationships. Because let's be real, 20 years down the road, they're going to remember our names. They're going to remember how they felt in that class. They probably aren't going to remember how to factor that trinomial from algebra. They're not going to remember how to do some of the actual content that we taught them. But it's going to be about the way they saw themselves as a mathematician, the way that they said, oh yeah, I remember I was able to be successful that year. Math actually made sense. I felt like I belonged there. And such a powerful reminder this afternoon, morning, evening, whenever you're listening to this, just to focus on building those relationships with the students and really centering them and making that be your legacy. So for our listeners, for those that want to hear more, we invite you to come join us in Atlanta in a few short weeks. This has been such a powerful episode, and we've had lots of wonderful episodes. This is my last episode as co-host of Adding It All Up, as my turn as past president is coming to an end. So I want to just say thank you to our community. It has been a joy. It has been an honor to serve as the entity I'm president for 2 years. And then for this last year as past president supporting LaTrenda. LaTrenda's going nowhere. She's around for another year as president, and then she'll transition to the past president. The podcast is going nowhere. Adding It All Up is staying the same. It's still there. You'll still hear LaTrenda's voice starting next month, but instead of my voice, you'll hear Dewey Gottlieb's voice. And Dewey is the incoming president-elect, and I am so excited to see the work that he and LaTrenda will continue to do, both with this podcast and pushing us all forward to really thinking deeply about what is mathematics? How do we best teach mathematics? How do we better reach the needs of every single one of our students? I'm so excited for this next year to continue to see LaTrenda's leadership. It's been an honor to support her for this last year. And she knows I'm not going anywhere. She has my cell phone number. She knows how to get a hold of me if she ever just needs to have a little venting session or wants my input or my congratulations for a job well done. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks for listening in and for tuning in to this Adding It All Up. Please don't forget to follow, subscribe, share this podcast with your fellow math educators, and join LaTrenda and Dewey next month as they talk about the importance of engaging families in mathematics in meaningful, everyday ways. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kevin, for everything.
Thank you for your service.
Start the school year strong with the #1 math platform in North America. Join over 800,000 teachers using Prodigy for math practice that's fun, effective, and totally free for educators. Learn more at prodigy.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Adding It All Up. At NCTM, we strive to bring you the biggest topics happening in mathematics. Join us next month for another exciting discussion.